y'all, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Samantha Leighanne, and I talk about books. So here we are, it's the end of October. October was a pretty good month for me. Last month was one of the best months that I've had, so September was really good. October was also really good. I stayed on top of my reading. I posted content for you guys. I have hit 1,900 subscribers as of today, which is shocking, and I know that I was supposed to do a 1,800 Q&A. I did film that, and I'm in the process of editing it right now. That should be the video that goes up after this one. Okay, so what did October look like for me in terms of reading? So I finished 9 books, which is great. Love that. Finished 9 books. That comes out to a total of 2,217 pages. When we break down formatting, I read 6 physical books. I did not read anything from my e-reader this month, and I listened to 3 audiobooks. 6 of my books were from my shelves. The 3 audiobooks that I listened to were from my library. Breaking down genres, I read 4 horror books and 5 thrillers. And honestly, that wasn't even like because it was October. It was just because that's what I wanted to read. Ever since I came back and started like reading and making content again, I have been very mindful of what I feel like reading just because I don't want to put myself in a slump again. So hence why horror and thrillers has kind of been my thing lately. 8 of the books were adult, 1 was considered young adult, 6 male authors and 3 female. So I'm still not doing very great as far as that goes. I definitely need to do better. And then for star breakdown, I had 1 5-star book this month, which is awesome. I had 3 4 stars and 5 3 stars, no 2 or 1. So it was a pretty good month. All right, so let's dive in so that I don't talk for a million years. So the first book that I picked up, I was super excited to pick this up. This is Violet by Scott Thomas. This is his sophomore book. His first book, Kill Creek, I read last year and absolutely loved it. It made it into my favorite horror books video, which will be linked up above if you would like to check that out. Anyway, okay, so talking about Violet, I gave this 4 stars. Basic plot of this book, you have our main character, Chris. She has a young child. She has recently lost her husband in a tragic accident, which we find out the circumstances of later on in the book as the story progresses. However, she is not dealing with this very well. Her daughter is also not dealing with it super well either. So they decide to head to a remote town that Chris spent her summers in growing up, and they have an old vacation home that she used growing up as well. It's also a home that was used whenever her mother was dying of what I believe was cancer, and so the property itself holds a lot of memories for her, but she is going here and is trying to really reconnect with her daughter and really go through the grieving process. However, as the story progresses and they get in and they get into the house, something is not right. And it takes Chris a while to come to terms with this because her daughter does seem to kind of be coming back to herself, but something doesn't feel right. There are people in the town that don't feel right. There are other girls that have disappeared in the town, and girls are starting to disappear again. You know, we take the journey with Chris and her daughter and kind of discover exactly what's been going on. So I will say that if you don't enjoy a slow burn, I don't think that this is going to be a book that you enjoy very much. I personally really loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked, again, that slow burn quality. We all know that I'm a huge fan of that. Love what this has to say about grief and the process of grieving and how each of us deals with different things in different ways and some of the coping mechanisms that we can use while we're going through the grieving process. There is the relationship between the mother and daughter. Not being a mother, I can't speak very well to that, but the relationship itself did feel very organic, which I liked because sometimes I find relationships like that written to feel a little forced, and I didn't feel that here. So he did a good job with that. I thought it was a really great follow-up to Kill Creek, personally. I thought the storytelling was just really well done. Again, I love his writing style, and I definitely look forward to a lot more from this author. So next book that I picked up was The Silent Patient. This was my 5-star read for the month. I really fucking liked this, okay? Again, with the basic plot, Alicia, I don't remember her last name, but our main character, Alicia, she is a famous painter. However, she has had some mental health issues in the past, but she is married. She absolutely loves her husband. Things are going really well for her until one day she fatally shoots her husband 5 times. She's convicted of that crime. She ends up going to a mental health institution and does not speak a word after the murder of her husband. So, like, she doesn't put up her defense, none of that. Enter a new psychologist, psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, whatever they call them in this book, into this facility that she is living in, receiving her treatment in. And he is just absolutely fascinated with her and wants to make her talk. He wants to find out what happened, right? And so this book kind of takes you on the journey of him trying to find out what happened, finding out more about her. And so you're going back and forth between his perspective and what's going on in his life. And then you're also getting snippets of Alicia's diary. So you're kind of seeing both sides because Alicia doesn't speak. The non-linear progression of this book, I enjoyed. And I will say that for a thriller, like, this one swerved me, okay? And that's been happening a couple times lately, and I'm fucking here for it because I find it so easy to predict a lot of books now. It's because I do read so many thrillers, but I really liked this. He swerved me at the end, but also there were just some like really good quotes in here too, and about love and what it is to love someone, and how sometimes the things that we think are love really aren't. And I don't really want to say too much more about it other than that, just because, you know, it's a thriller, and I, for one, like going into things, you know, decently blind. So 5 stars. Not like the best written book, but like the entertainment value, chef's kiss, loved it. Next book I listened to for my library, and that is The Trees Crept In by the author that I can't remember the name of. There will be a graphic on the screen for you over here. But I picked this up because Jade from Bedtime Bookworm was talking about how amazing the audio was, and I enjoy a good audiobook. And I will definitely tell you that the audiobook of this is excellent. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. The book itself, the story itself, I wasn't in love with, but the way, the production value of the audio itself was really, really good. Honestly, the plot of this one is, like, I knew nothing about this going into this book. I just checked it out from the library after I saw Jade recommend it. You're dealing with a young girl, a teenager, and her younger sister that are running from what seems to be an abusive household. They run to their aunt's home, which seems to be like everything's okay at first, and then it's not. And it feels like the trees from the forest that they came through are like closing in on the house. And there's also like this weird, almost post-apocalyptic vibe to it. It's very difficult to explain, but again, the audio quality was really, really good. It was so creepy. There would be moments where you'd be going through the narration and the narrator would be speaking, you know, the basic, like what was happening, but then in the background there are these whispers, and it was really, really creepy. And hopefully this is like giving you ASMR vibes, but it wasn't like ASMR. It was creepy as fuck, right? So I thought that was really great. I thought that the production quality and everything was good. Again, with the story, I do feel like it probably could have been a little bit shorter. There were a couple of parts where I was like, all right, where are we gonna go? Like, I need us to get somewhere. But then when we finally got to where we were going, this is another book that speaks a lot about grief and how we deal with that and what that looks like. But, you know, I did very much enjoy it. Again, if you're, I don't know what it would be like actually reading it. But the audiobook version is really good. So the next book that I picked up was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. So as most of you know, Haunting of Hill House is one of my favorite horror books, but I did very much enjoy this story. Mary Cat, who is the person who is telling the story, she lives in a house with her sister Constance and an uncle, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's her uncle. And the town pretty much hates them. And the reason that the town hates them is because it seems as though Constance killed their entire family. That's what you're led to believe. I won't spend too much time talking about this because it would be like, I feel like it would be considered a classic. I gave it like 3.5 stars. I definitely prefer Haunting of Hill House to this one, but I do really like this. I really enjoy Shirley Jackson's writing style, and I have seen a couple people lately that have talked about how overrated she is. And that's cool if you think that, but I personally enjoy her writing style, and I enjoyed this book. So if you liked Haunting of Hill House and you haven't picked this up, I prefer that to this, but I would still pick it up and give it a shot. Next book I picked up is The Whisper Man by Alex North. This is another thriller, another book of the month edition. This story follows a man who has just recently lost his wife. He has a young son that he's kind of struggling to connect with. And in the town that he lives in, there is a series of murders that happened several years ago in which young boys were taken and then killed. And they thought, and they caught the person who did it. Well, these murders start happening again, and they're like, well, wait a minute, we fucking caught this guy, so what does that mean? Like, why are these children disappearing again? And so, you know, this is the main character of the story, and his son do have a connection with what is going on in this. So I liked this book. I didn't love it. I found it to be pretty predictable in a couple of spots. It's funny that I just talked about this, but the relationship between father and son didn't feel as organic to me. I will say that the pacing in it was pretty good. There wasn't really a moment where I was like, okay, can we get somewhere? Like, I didn't find it to be slow, so that was nice. It just wasn't as compelling as some of the other things that I read this month. I would recommend it. If you like thrillers, don't expect anything groundbreaking, but, you know, I definitely didn't think it was bad. So the next book that I read was The Taker by Alma Katsu. This is part 1 of a trilogy. This is kind of a like supernatural thriller. Alma Katsu, the only experience that I had had with her work up until this point was I read The Hunger. This is another book that actually appeared on my favorite horror list. This was very different from The Hunger in a good way. So I'm going to ask you guys, have you ever read a book and you're reading it and you're like, oh, this is just okay. You know, I don't love it. And with this being part of a series, I actually said several times while I was reading it, you know, I just don't know that I'm going to continue this series. I just don't think that I like it enough to continue it. However, I got to the end of this and I was like, it was days later and I could not stop thinking about this book. I'm still thinking about this book. I'm actually starting the second in the series today, because I could not stop thinking about this book. The book opens in a very small town in Maine, and you are in a hospital with one of the few doctors that are there. The police come in and they bring this little teeny tiny girl with them, and they're like, she's a murderer, but she's covered in blood. We don't know who she is. You need to check her out and make sure that everything's good. So he proceeds to do that, and as he proceeds to do that, he just feels this like really strong connection with this girl, and he's been dealing with some things in his own life, and feels this strong connection to this girl. She begins telling him her story, and the plot kind of progresses from there. Again, it is slow, and it does take a minute to get to where it's going. However, it's kind of a like supernatural thriller / historical fiction, and y'all know that I love historical fiction. So just in general, I didn't realize that I actually like cared about the characters. I really cared about what was happening until I got to the end, and I was like, okay, all right. I didn't love it, and then like the more that I sat on it and the more that I started to think about it, I was like, oh my god, I really do love this. Like, I need to read the rest of this series. So again, I'm starting it today. So be aware that it does seem to have like some pacing issues, but if you like historical fiction, I would say give it a shot. It's nothing super crazy. It's definitely not horror oriented in any way, shape, or form. I don't feel like it is. However, I will tell you that there are some very large trigger warnings for rape, sexual abuse, and miscarriage as well. So that is a thing that happens. Just be aware. But 4 stars, I really liked it. I'm kind of really looking forward to starting the next book later on tonight. So next up, I picked up 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill. This was one of the last things that I needed to read from him until he published Full Throttle earlier this month, which is another short story or novella collection. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. There are some really good ones in this, and then there were some that weren't super memorable. I'm a huge fan of short fiction, and I think that Joe Hill is one of those writers that does do really well with short fiction. Most of his books I have really enjoyed. However, I think some of my favorite works from him are definitely short fiction, specifically Strange Weather. So again, there were a couple of really good hits in this one. There were a couple of misses. There were a couple that just I didn't really feel much of anything at all about. However, if you do enjoy short stories, like, I would recommend picking this up. The next book that I picked up, I had placed this on hold for my library like forever ago, and it finally came in, which is why I decided to read it, and that's The Diviners by Libba Bray. People talk about how fucking amazing this story is, and I thought that it was just okay. I think I gave it 3 stars. So this takes place in the Roaring 20s. You have, oh shit, I don't even remember her name. Why am I so bad at names? Evie is her name. Evie, she's 17 and she has a gift. She can touch things and she can like see where they came from. She can see things about the person that article belonged to, and she kind of like does it as a party trick. Anyway, it gets her in trouble in her hometown, and so she ends up going to Boston, New York, something, a northern city, to live with her uncle, who runs this museum of like the occult or something. So these murders are happening at the same time. So the uncle is trying to help like solve these murders because, you know, they seem to have an occult aspect to them, and he's somebody who is well versed in that, so he's trying to help out. And you know, Evie can't seem to keep her ass out of trouble, but she's also trying to help. And I will say that the audiobook of this I did really enjoy. The production value was really well. The person who narrated it did a really good job. But the story itself just wasn't as compelling as I thought that it was going to be. It's like 18 hours long, which I listened at 2 times speed. So it took me roughly 9 hours to get through, and it felt every bit 9 hours. I will say that. I don't know, something about this story just didn't speak to me the way that I wanted it to, especially after it had been so hyped. I was expecting to go into this and absolutely love it. I honestly don't know if I will continue the series, if I'm being completely honest. I started out really liking it. I loved where it was going. I loved the vibe. And then it just kind of started to slow down, and it started to stall to me. And there were like whole sections that I felt like could have been cut out. So I do think that it suffered from a pacing issue, and I didn't love our main character, Evie, and that made it hard because she is the main focus. There are various other characters. You do kind of jump around, going through different perspectives, but again, I didn't find anybody really compelling, and so I'm just not 100% sure that I'll continue with the series, but it was just okay. And the last thing that I finished, which I finished today, is No One Gets Out Alive by Adam Nevill. This doesn't look like it's really big, right? This is 600 pages because they're Bible pages, and I didn't realize that when I started it, and it feels every bit 600 pages. And I'll be honest, it probably could have lost about 200 of those pages. From the very beginning, you're like drawn into the story. Things start happening from page 1. So I will give it that. It started out really great, and then it just started to slowly devolve. So you got through probably the first quarter, I would say go in thirds, right? So the first third, great pacing, great story, really interested to see what happens. And then you get to this middle section, or like the middle third, and it's like, all right, this is information that I do not need to know. And can something start happening again, right? And then we get to the end, and like things start to pick up and everything from there. So this is about a young girl. She's probably about 19. She's been kicked out of her stepmother's house. Her father has recently died. She does not get along with her stepmother, and she's like doing temp work, trying to make ends meet. She breaks up with her boyfriend, and now she has nowhere to live. And so she ends up, I think Birmingham is the place that she's in. This does take place in the UK. She ends up finding this really, really cheap room for rent, and there's supposed to only be girls living there, and she's like, oh, thank God, finally I caught a break. Well, no, she didn't. She didn't catch a break at all. And she goes and she meets the landlord, and he's kind of a creep, but she's like, it'll be fine. It was not fine. She should have trusted her instincts. and there is a very large supernatural element to this. There's a large supernatural element. It's definitely horror, but I mean, it was okay. 3 stars. I would read more from Adam Nevill. I actually just watched the film adaptation of his story, The Ritual. I am interested to read that, and I think I have one other book of his on my shelves as well. So while I would read more from him, I didn't love this book. It was just okay. Pacing issues for sure. Characters were compelling. He does a very good job of detailed writing, so like I could picture the scenes very, very well, which I did really enjoy and made it a lot easier to get into the story. So I did very much enjoy that aspect of it, but wasn't my favorite book that I read this month, but it also wasn't bad. All right, so those are the books that I read this month. 9 whole books, 2,000 pages. It was a pretty good month. Obviously very horror heavy. I don't know what the next month is going to bring for me as far as genres and such. It's really just gonna depend, because again, I'm just kind of going with the flow. I know November is nonfiction November for a lot of people. I actually am in the middle of a nonfiction right now. I started it last week, but just haven't had a chance to finish it yet. So technically I'm participating in Nonfiction November. So that's all I have for you guys today. Tell me if you've read any of these books, if you have, what you've thought about them. Comment down below and let me know. Remember to keep it spoiler free for those people that have not read these books. As always, if this is your first time here and you like what you see and you want to see more, you should click thumbs up, or you can hit subscribe if you want to. You can also hit the little bell icon to be notified every time I upload. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.